Hello and welcome to the next in our series, Getting to Positive Cash Flow. Now, our last event was talking about getting a fast start and taking your project all the way to the first of one of 4 cash flow positive positions. Today's presentation is going to focus on just one of those, which is funding. Now, we find that for most inventors, funding is the hardest part. So we're going to dive into that and give you a look at how it actually works. My name's Daniel O'Connor. I've been commercialising innovation, intellectual property for 40 years now. I've done commercial, industrial, consumer in both products and services. So I've got quite a range, and I'll bring that experience to this today. Now, I also invented the Cornerstone Investor Model we're going to show here today. Now, after this presentation, you should be able to understand why most pitches fail and why some of them fail before they even get started. We're going to show you how to target entities who will want to invest in your project. And we're going to show you how to craft a winning pitch without relying on return on investment, because I can tell you from the outset, return on investment doesn't work with early stage. And the reason why is you don't have cash flow. And then finally, I want to get the whole thing, show you how we get the whole thing done in 3 to 6 months. So now, before we get started, I want to apologize in advance because I have a few very, very heavy slides here. Some of them, with 20, 30 words on each one, or sentences, 10 sentences, 10 lines. It's just very heavy. But what I want to do is, I think I needed this to get the points across rather than have 50 slides. I just want to do it in 15. And I hope you agree with it afterwards that it was worth it. Now, today, we're going to lift the curtain on how IP funding really works, not how people, accountants and solicitors will tell you how it works, because they're more orientated towards existing enterprises and they get valued completely differently. So any pitch you put forward is not going to stand up. I'm going to show you a pitch today that was prepared by the inventor in the Inventors Academy, and it did his job in the first pitch. He got all funding he needed, everything all set to go. He also did a distribution agreement with the same party. Then I'm going to break down all the moving parts for you, and afterwards we're going to run a 30-minute Q&A with that particular inventor. His name is David Sheridan, and David is on the call with us today, so I'm hoping that you'll gain quite a bit from that. So we'll ask you to put your questions into the chat box. I can see the questions. I'll ask them of David, and then we'll get the discussion going. That'll be for 30 minutes after this presentation. So stick around because it's going to be well worth it. Now, I just want to get in there and share my screen. Now this is getting to a point where we can do it. Yes. Okay. So today is all about funding innovations, I mentioned, and getting you to positive cash flow, but on one particular aspect, which is funding. So let's get started, shall we? Now, what we're going to cover today is the commercialization path to market that we all need to look at. Then I'm going to cover the commercialization gap, because this is a big deal for everybody who does not understand how innovation works, and you need to understand why so many projects fail. After that, we're going to work on the Cornerstone Investor Model. That's one of my innovations. And we're going to dive into David's relevant case study. And afterwards, we're going to see whether or not that could work for your project and see if you applied these techniques to your own project at the moment, whether or not you could get funding as well. And finally, we're going to have Q&A with David, and I've also got Simon Frayne on this call. Simon is a level 2 IP mentor. He's had a lot of experience raising capital on behalf of people who want it done for you rather than a done with you project. So let's jump into this. Also, at the end of this, I'm going to give you an opportunity to get a free copy of one of my books. You'll just need to give me an address and I'll send it. So stay with me to the end and you'll get access to that. So now I don't want to talk too much about me, but I'll give you a quick introduction. I started in 1983 with the telephone accounting system. If you checked out of a hotel in the 1980s and you got a phone bill, because we didn't have cell phones then, and your bill showed you the costs that they billed you for making the calls you made, and they show you the destination of those calls, that was called the telephone accounting system. We developed that here in Australia. We shared it out around nationally, and then it was actually acquired by one of the big multinational companies out of Japan, who then integrated it into their own PBX offer and didn't offer it to anyone else at that time. Now, I also built the Cornerstone Investor Model. I'll be showing you part of that today. Now, the commercial path to market is the first thing I need you to understand. And that's, we always start with an idea. Once we've closed off the idea and we know exactly what we've got, we then have to set our target. And most people then move to get a patent. And then once they've got a patent, they look at funding for the patent. Once they've got their funding, they then want to scale or license their project. And after that, they want to go all the way to an exit, which would be an IPO, which is initial public offering or a public listing or something like that. Generally, they want a building on their main street with their name on it, and that might represent their success. And unfortunately, that leaves out so many stages and steps that it doesn't make it viable. So I'm going to show you how it really works. Now, firstly, we still start with the idea, but before we do anything about patenting, we have to get a commercial model. We have to know that the idea can make money. And the way we do that is we look at proof of concept, we look at market validation, pricing, costing, and sourcing. We need to know between pricing and costing, there's enough margin for us and for our licensees or our distributors or our retailers to be able to make money on this. And then, of course, we have to have a team selection. We have to know we have the skill set to do this. And that includes, with sourcing, we need to know we can get hold of all the components on a long term at the right price. But in team selection, it's all about getting the right people for the long term at the right price. Once we've done that, then we pretty much know the project's going to work. So then we want to look at patenting. We haven't told anyone around it about the project yet. If we have interviewed anyone in market validation, we've talked about the problem, not about their product or your product. After that, we then have to engineer a path to market. And we do that by aiming not at the end goal of an exit, but rather at a pre-scale. Pre-scale is where you have enough cash flow that venture capitalists will then want to accelerate you all the way through to your exit. So at pre-scale, to get there, we have to have a path to market, or we have to have one of four or all of four paths to market. And we do that with funding, distribution, licensing, or a trade sale. Funding gets you started. It takes you all the way through. We only ask for enough to get us to where we can then repeat a distribution or a licensing agreement, or if you wanted a trade sale, it would sell the entire project and be able to repay the funding. Now, in a trade sale, that's where you may decide the project doesn't fit your portfolio and you want to dispose of it. That's fine. If it's worth money, you can trade sell it to somebody and then step away. So that's the commercialization gaps that we see quite regularly in these. And if you don't understand that full process, it's going to come back and bite you every time. So today we're going to talk about funding in particular. So let's jump into it with the Cornerstone Investor Model. Now, the first element of the Cornerstone Investor Model is actually prospecting. You need to understand that we don't get high net worth individuals. We look for people within the industry or the market. They're the people more likely to invest, because when they do due diligence, they're not looking at the industry and the market and then the project and the people and the product. They're only looking at people and product. That's it. So they already have a good understanding of industry and market. Their due diligence is going to be about a third of the time. We have to look at customizing the value that we present in each pitch for each target investor. They're all different. They're highly customized, and we'll show you why. And we plan out the commercial model so they can see how we're going to take this to market. If they understand that, they understand that we've also looked at their risks. We work with non-cash currencies. So asking someone for $5 million to get you to positive cash or to get you to profit is not likely to work, but asking for $500,000 to get you to positive cash flow will work. And if half of that is not cash, but rather services and access to equipment, etc., then you're going to find that that person is far more suited to getting on board with you because their risks are far less. We also use leverages to offset that risk. Leverage, by definition, is something that you can give to the other party that doesn't cost you anything but gives them a great benefit. We'll give you a list of 14 different leverages, and I'll work through just how they work. And then finally, we give them exit options. So people won't get in if they can't get out. So you need to show them how you're going to get them out. Doesn't mean to say they have to exit, but they do have to have options to exit at different points. Now you can see there are 5 different elements of this that don't involve return on investment. And by definition, the return on investment is not the most critical decision criteria for IP investors. I can tell you that from experience. We've learned that in UN Task Force for Innovation and Competitiveness. I'm the Australian member for that task force. So let's jump in and show you what the funding pitch differences really stack out to be. Firstly, we don't do a big pitch, but I'm going to work through just what the elements are. First one is inventors focus. Most inventors want to focus on high net worth investors. Let's find somebody who's rich enough to invest in this and ask them for some money. Whereas we realize that those people have other options and they're not necessarily the right market for you. Most people will look for minor shareholders and lots of them. So let's get 50 shareholders at $100,000 each. Whereas we wouldn't. We'd look for a single cornerstone investor who's from the industry or the market, and they are more likely to stick. Most people use a generic pitch. This is what I'm offering. Here's the returns. Let's jump on this. We pitch specifically to each prospect because their leverages, those benefits that they're going to get, are different, and they have a different value for each one. We calculate that value so we can put that to them. Most inventors want to be funded all the way through to global profit. We want to get you to cash flow positive because then the project itself can start generating enough cash to get you to pre-scale. Many inventors pitch their products and then their returns, and that's what they focus on. We don't. We focus on commercial model and leverages. I'll explain what they are in a while. Most pitches are all about the cash, and they're all about give it to me today, and then I'll be able to do something with it in the next 6 to 12 months, and we'll make it all happen. We look at cash. We also look at other currencies, including access to facilities, personnel, equipment use, etc. So it's not about how much money you get, and it's also sequence. It's not upfront. Now, most investors want to talk about their project risks. We want to talk about the investor's risks. We're only talking about the investor. He's the only person he wants to hear about. Most people want to ignore the knowledge of the industry and just focus on, you want to get into our industry, it's really good. Here's the product's a winner. Go for that. Whereas our partnership target is from the industry, so we don't have to worry about that due diligence gap. And finally, due diligence can take weeks to get a decision, whereas we're ready with our next steps and our due diligence file. We hand it across the table at the end of our pitch, so we know they're going to make a decision pretty much straight away. Okay, so let's dive in and show you how our 12-point pitch works. We do 12 slides in 30 minutes, and we can get a deal from that. There's no product showboating. We don't have to talk about the product. They are seated at that table because they've heard about this product and they want to know what the deal is. And so it's all about the deal. We don't bag the competition. There's so many times I've found out later that we've got a no, and the no is because somebody's in-laws owns the other company or works in it, something like that, and it just comes spat horribly onto you. It's not always cash, and we're talking about other currencies that we're using. We talk about leverages, and we use these to offset their risk. So if they're putting in $500,000, which is usually what the maximum we ask for, then we're showing them how we're going to offset that with $500,000 worth of leverages. And when we're ready to go at the end of this, our last slide is the 12th slide is where to from here. And part of that says, here's our due diligence file. And this is the program for the next 2 to 4 weeks. And this is what we want you to do. This is what we'll do. And then we'll be able to then put pen to paper in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Okay, so there's your 12-point pitch. I now want to take you to a case study. Now, this is David Sheridan. I mentioned he's from Gympie in Queensland. He came up with a way that a farmer or anyone else could build a shed single-handedly. Most sheds are done by large-scale steel suppliers. They're cut fabricated in a factory and then flat packed and sent out to site. But then our crew has to turn up to put this together, and they can take weeks to coordinate. They can charge you days for travel time and accommodation, and then they charge for the thing. In most cases, and we're not talking little sheds like we see here, but in most cases, these sheds can cost $100,000 for a shed, and they can then cost $60,000 to put it up. Now, what David did is he engineered a sleeve that fits over the posts, and he then builds on those the trusses. He bolts the trusses to the sleeves. Once that's done, he can put the whole roof together on the ground. If he drops a bolt or a tech screw, he just picks it up. It's just that easy. There's no working from heights, nothing else. Once he's done that, he might put on solar panels, he might put on lighting, whatever he does. And then once it's all ready to go, he then puts a pulley system at the top of each pole, and he might have 60 poles rather than just the 6 or 8 you see here. And once he's got those poles ready to go, he's got a winch on the outside of every pole, and he manually winches up 3 inches on every one of them as he walks around the entire structure, which might be 20 metres by 50 metres. And he's winching it up 3 inches at a time all the way around until he gets it to height. Once he's got it to height, the bolt holes are already there. He's putting in the bolts, locking it down, and the structure is totally sturdy. The sleeves stay there. He removes the pulleys and the winches and sends them back for a rebate, so he doesn't even have to pay full price for those. So let's show you how this solo shed system works. The whole idea, by the way, is to get a farmer, single person, to be able to put this up themselves in a remote location. Any of these local sheds in suburbs are not applicable for this because they usually don't even have frames. Okay, the idea, the concept is to build it on the ground and winch it up. Any size sheds, one-person job. No crews with height certificates are required for this. They don't need lifting cranes or scissor lifts, platforms of any sort. There's no scaffolding, no safety harnesses, no certificates. Concrete flooring isn't essential to do beforehand. In fact, if you're in a tropical area, you can actually put the roof up and then go and then tilt the walls up using the same pulleys and winches. Once you've done that, you can then pour the floor. So it means you're not subject to weather in any way. There's also no coordinating required for crews or rental of equipment or the weather even. So all of this is doable at any time. Now, what it means for the average farmer is DIY up to 30% saving on overall costs, and because the heaviest load that he's going to lift is one end of a truss as he puts it onto the sleeve platform, that's it. He could do a 20-metre lifting at one end, putting it on there, bolting it, going the other end and putting that one on, balancing it there. Once it's all done, he's putting the C-channels a long ways, giving it all strength, off it goes. Very easy to do. Now, that can save up to 6 months on crews as well. So, because sometimes they need to coordinate, sometimes they need to cut a road in there to get cranes in. There's all sorts of problems with big structures that this eliminates. So how did David do it based on this system? How did he get funding? Well, I'm going to tell you how he did it. Firstly, he, as part of the Inventors Academy, he used the 10-4-1 process we do. The top 10 he wanted to get, he then picked out his top 4 that he'll going to prepare the leverages for and cost them out, and then he pitched to one and got it. Now, the 10-4-1, in the top 10, he categorized the entire industry as 3 categories. First category was franchises who do sheds usually up to 12 meters across, any length but 12 meters across. Those guys work from an area of about 150 kilometers from each of their outlets, and there are 11 franchises in Australia with 550 odd outlets between them. Now, the 550 outlets were the competition, and what David did is he wanted one of those franchises to get it done. The second area was what we call blow-away sheds. They're the ones without frames that go into backyards where there's less resistance from wind, and those are sold by retailers. There's 2 major retailers, hardware stores, chains, and also 2 other miners as well. He eliminated those because they don't sell these major sheds. And the third area are the large construction companies, and there's quite a few of those, but they do the very large hangars and grain sheds and all the big things like that. He's quite good at that, quite happy with it, but he thought the best one is to get one of the franchises. So his four was one, not the biggest, but others within that area. So once he picked out who he wanted, he then pitched to lost sales. Now, I'm going to show you what we do with leverages after this, but just giving you the one leverage of lost sales, what he did was he said his pitch was to walk in and say, in the PowerPoint presentation he did, in the last 6 months, you've probably done 100 quotes and you've probably got 50 of those. Of the remaining quotes, some of them didn't go ahead with other people because they couldn't afford the installation. If you went back to them, could you convert them to your sheds or your structures if you used the same techniques, same process, but you eliminated the cost for installation? If that were the case, I'm sure most of those will come in, and that's what we did. Now, we calculated in the leverages value, and I'll show you how he did that later on. We've restricted the offer geographically because David wanted to give away 50% of his project on a joint venture. He formed a joint venture company, gave 50% to one of these groups, and he owned 50%, and they jointly did this, but it was only for Australia. And he owns 100% of all the other countries. So he knows he's going to make all his money in the USA. So this was done for Australia. Now, that was fine for those companies because that's all they were working in at any one time. And although some of them said, well, why can't we be part of the international? They have no experience and the price is going to be different. They then realised that and didn't bother asking for it. Now, he knew what the non-cash items were, and there were lots of them, and I'll go through those with you. He had the funding sequence. He knew exactly what he needed. This was a 6-month commercialisation project, and he knew exactly what he needed when, and so how much they needed to come up with and at which month of those 6 months. He had the script and the pitch deck all prepared. He was able to pull out the templates from the online self-paced learning that we have with the Inventors Academy, and he was able to, we helped him and he got it all together. He then did his 12-point pitch, and he made that pitch to only one prospect, and he got funded. So at that point, he had his due diligence file ready, and it was all good to go. Now, I want to talk to you about how his leverages worked. I want to give you the list of leverages. I'll do a quick explanation of those, and then I'll show you how he was able to use those leverages. So firstly, here's the list. There's 15 there. We actually just used 14. The last one is not a leverage. I put it in there because it's essential to understand that these leverages are across people for a partnership, not an investment. So anybody who's in the industry or the market are looking for partnership, that's how we fund, using leverages. So let's talk about existing channels. Obviously, they already had ways they could sell sheds, and all they're doing is saying, you use the same engineering product and we'll just give you our sleeves and it'll be done on the outside, winched. You send back the winches and the pulleys and get a rebate. So instead of paying $160,000 for a $100,000 shed, you pay $105,000 and then you get a rebate, a certain amount of that back when you send back the equipment if it's received back in condition. Now, access to skilled personnel, obviously they have all the people already. So you have access to welders, even forklift drivers, gantry crane operators, you name it, all these people are needed, CNC press operators, they already have them and they could probably give him access to those people without too much expense. There was a limited exclusivity period offered. In that first 6 months, we're going to call this an R&D period, and therefore you'll only have access to it. None of your competitors will. After that, we'll open it up and you'll be earning money every time a competitor takes it on. We'll be white labeling it, so you can call it whatever you like. And when we launch it, we'll have a different name, so people will think it's a competitive product, but that's as far as it will go. Recovering lost sales, I've explained. Competitive advantages in the market. All of those competitive advantages belong to them until others take on the thing. So there's no way people can compete directly with you until they've got that license, you can see. Now, with some of this, an element of this contribution was going to be for R&D. because we still needed all the engineering done on all the different types of I-beams, C-channels, SHS, RHS, different sizes. And he needed all of those approved, engineering approved for the highest standards so it could be globally approved. So as a result of that, he didn't want them to give him cash for that. He wanted them to pay the bills as and when they fell due, and they would get the R&D tax concessions associated with that as a collaborative research partner. You need to talk to your accountant about that. I'm not giving tax advice here. So they were able to create their test prototypes. They were able to do his test prototypes and jigs and everything else within the factory because they have all the skill set already. They were able to increase production throughput. Their production was running at about 60%. They got that up to about 85, but they'll be getting it to 95 by the time this thing really cranks up. And that's exactly what you want with any plant, because you're not hiring more people, you're not buying more equipment, you're just utilising to the full what you've already got. Access to regulatory testing. It's important that he needed his engineering done, but they had access to the engineers who could sign off on this, so it was going to be an advantage for him. So they also had a reciprocal first right of refusal for purchasing his remaining shares, or he could purchase theirs at any time. If either party wanted to sell, the other party got 14 days in which to respond to the same deal. So we also were offering a non-cash acquisition later. That's where it's a public company. You can say, don't give me cash for my half. Later on, when the price is right and I want to sell, just give me shares in your company and I'll take that, because then I can ring my broker and turn them into cash if I wanted to, but I can also participate with you and build this. Now, as I mentioned, that only works if all of those 14 are a partnership, not an investment. Now, let me show you how David used that. Firstly, there's a breakdown of all the different components of it. The first one was cash for wages and expenses. David wanted to be looked after for 6 months. He didn't need salary for himself, but he wanted his wife to do the admin. So yes, he did want that. $12,000 a month was really the only full outgoings, almost all of the outgoings in cash. Next, he wanted sharing an admin and sales crew. There was a price to pay on that. They already had a lot of admin people. They already had a lot of sales people and a network Australia-wide. This is great for him because it means he doesn't have to go and recruit people and spend all that money training them and then sending them out and getting premises and everything else. It's all included. From there, he needed samples for marketing, samples for engineering to construction. So all of that, he was building trailers for field days. Those trailers had 4 posts with winches and removable winches and pulleys, and a little roof on the top, and he could winch that up to height so he could show it. But he also could go into a place with a larger truck, and on a field day, let's say over 3 days, the first day he built the shed, and the third day he'd remove it so people could see it, the whole thing working. There was a sublease of facilities and equipment that he needed. He knew he didn't want to go out there and sign leases and everything else. So it was a lot easier to just go and get $20,000 a month, a space in their corner of their factory, access to their gantry cranes, forklifts, racking, CNC presses, all of that sort of stuff, welders, you name it, they had it, he needed it. And so saved a lot of money. And finally, there was $100,000 for collaborative research partnership. So that money was to pay the research bills as and when they fell due, and they could then claim back $50,000 on that, or close to it. I think it's about claim $43,000 in Australia, but in other countries it's more like $50,000. So that's how it worked out for them. You can see now suddenly how much cash is this? This is $12,000 a month. It's pretty easy when you look at it. So, but that's not the biggest. The biggest benefit here was to cover off all of that expense for that prospective investor was the risk offset using $2 million plus. It was about $2.4 million in lost sales that they thought they could recover. When we calculated it out, there was about $2.4 million. Now, if they got $2 million worth of that, it's more than going to cover their $12,000 a month. Absolutely. So, and for 6 months, they've got exclusivity on it. So the reason why we like to have that exclusivity, by the way, is to make sure that people don't dither around to try and keep their exclusivity a bit longer. You've got 6 months, make the most of it, get in there, and at the end of 6 months, when we've got this operational, you can make a lot of money in the meantime, but only if it's ready. If the price not ready, then that's the problem. So, okay, so that's how his leverage has worked. Now I'll tell you why that worked. Firstly, David had a process. He had signed into our Inventors Academy, and he knew how to invent, but he didn't necessarily know how to commercialise. So he knew what he wanted to achieve, and he worked backwards. We set the agenda for him, and he worked backwards, so he understood how to go about this, to how the market would work, how they would want this product presented, how the deal would work, and then how he could engineer his project into that deal. He learned how from the online case studies. We have over 45 different case studies, lots of lessons in there. There's 25 hours or more of online self-paced learning. There's also all the checklist templates and everything else. The procedures were in there. We showed him how to identify his top 10 to get to 10-4-1. David calculated the value using the leverages list that I showed you. He then downloaded a 12-point pitch framework straight out of the elements of the Inventors Academy. He accessed the procedures and the scripts, so he knew exactly what to say as well. He tested his pitch with a cohort because we work in groups of 6, and the reason for this is because we want to get economies of scale. Firstly, that was our original intention, to make sure this was affordable, because otherwise it just wouldn't be affordable for a lot of inventors. But now using that, we found that there's a greater benefit, and that was the mastermind process kicks in, and you do so much better when you're group working. People are working with you on your project and vice versa, when you're working with them on their project. The benefits you get working on other people's projects is they are at different stages of the 6 stages of commercialization. You might be at stage 3 and they might be at stage 5 or stage 2, and you're getting experience working on their stages. And so you're embedding the learning as you're learning it, you're embedding it by trying it with other people's projects. The whole objective for our Inventors Academy is at the end of 6 months, you've got your project cashed up, and you never need another consultant in your life. Now, his first pitch got the job done. So not every pitch does in the first one, but usually we get it done in 4 pitches or less. He had detailed next steps already in his 12th slide, where to from here. It was things like, here's the due diligence, you've already signed the NDA, we're going to slide this across the table, you start your due diligence. I'm going to ask you to send me questions in writing, and I'll give you the answers within 24 hours. And then from here, in 7 days, I'm going to give you a list of elements of an agreement. We generally don't give them an agreement to sign. We give them elements of an agreement and say, would you like to review that? And then come back to us with what you think could be included or excluded, and we'll negotiate from there. And in 2 weeks' time, we'll sit down and nut it all out. And then after that, we can put it to solicitors and get the whole thing signed. People understand if you're driving the process, they'll stay to your timeline. The due diligence was able to start immediately, and of course, we got the result. Now, from David's perspective, he just followed the plan and knew they had to say